enormous concentration of power.
Democracy, poverty reduction, and cryptocurrency.
Are you sophisticated enough to invest in securities?
Bitcoin is actually a reversion to commodity money.
Decentralized social networking.
Hey everyone, today I've got Eric Starr, who's founder and CEO of UltraPass ID, as well as Dave Boulet, who's head of product. We're going to be talking about identity. We're going to be talking about security and decentralized systems and why it's important in today's society. So welcome, gentlemen. I kind of wanted to have you introduce yourselves and maybe talk a little bit about the project and what have you guys already accomplished until today.
Well, thanks for having us, Greg. So a couple of years ago, I guess it was the beginning of COVID, I was in my apartment in New York City watching the news, and I'm watching fellow New Yorkers crying on TV because they were unable to apply for unemployment insurance. Against the beginning of the pandemic, everything was shutting down. And it was evident that it was way too difficult for people to get to access the services that they needed at the time. And I was thinking to myself, this is, 2020, it shouldn't be that difficult. And I started thinking about all the things that are basically broken in civic engagement. So I put a list together and put a deck together and shared that with some friends, one of whom is Andrew Yang. And he was all over it because, again, he and I are similar in that we're looking to solve problems. And fast forward, months go by, and through his influence, I was able to connect with hundreds of volunteers that wanted to bring about a citizen portal, a way in which we can access or engage citizenry in a more simplified and to ultimately accelerate that civic engagement. And over the last 18 months or so, we've been building out that platform in order to do just that. We started out as citizencenter.us, migrated into accessamerica.us, and now we set up a public benefit corporation called UltraPass Identity Corporation. And our mission is to simplify and accelerate civic engagement while preserving and protecting the privacy of the individual. Dave Boulet, as you mentioned, is head of product, and he's really been a part of this. He was one of the original volunteers that joined me in citizencenter.us, and we've been building a platform ever since, and we're excited about the progress we've made, and a little overwhelmed about the challenges that are still ahead. But if we don't do it, we meaning collectively as an ecosystem, if we don't try to tackle these big problems, they'll never get solved. So that's what UltraPass is all about, to solve these big problems and make it easier to just be you.
I'm struck by how much what you guys are saying echoes what we say at Intercoin, which is if we don't do it, we're going to live in a world that's owned by giant corporations and their, closed systems. And it would be really nice for the individuals to have their own self-sovereignty when it comes to their own identity, at least, let alone maybe their address book, their relationships, ability to take action in their community would be nice. Every time you go and you log in with Google or you log in with Facebook, you're almost like reminded, right, that they control your access. And if they decide to cut you off, you won't be able to log in anymore, at least not with Google or Facebook. So
I think you're also giving away, they know more about you than you do by providing basically giving them access to all of this information. And I'm not a big conspiracy theorist person. I just kind of land more on the libertarian side of things. And I don't think most people just want to give away their information. But the reason they do that is obvious. It's easy. So the challenge is to just make it as easy to not give away your information as it is to give away your information. And we've learned this over time. People are unwilling to accept more complex, more difficult ways of accessing services, products, they're not willing to work harder for it while controlling their data privacy. So what we have to do is figure out a way to do that, and that's what we do.
I think, yeah. And by the way, I'm going to introduce Dave in a second. I just wanted to say, basically, there's so much to talk about here, and I'm glad I have you guys on because, we work with technology, we work with economics, we work with regulators to talk about that stuff. And this is probably the first time we talk really about identity and about the self-sovereignty here. I think a lot of libertarians in the audience really agree that people need more tools. I think the cryptocurrency revolution attracted first the, let's say the nerds and the geeks, right? People building stuff. Then it attracted the libertarian crowd because it really resonates that you are in charge of your own money. And in some ways that money can't even be inflated by anyone else. So it's literally Bitcoin attracted people for that reason. And then you've got smart contracts, which basically run on the blockchain and can't be censored. So whether or not you're told that you have to report things for taxes and whether or not they can discover what you did, right, and you dox yourself, you still have the permissionless ability to engage in things with Web3. And we're going to get to that. But that's a revolution from what happens. I'm the kind of libertarian that looks at the world and says, you know what, we don't have to necessarily complain about things because technology has been decentralizing power to the individual over the last however many years, hundreds of years. So for example, printing, you used to have what's called the imprimatur, the permission to print, because it was controlled. You had to go to someone who could print things for you in large amounts. Now you have desktop printing, you have Xerox copiers, right? This is a revolution. Instead of mailing things through the post office, the government operated post office, which Lysander Spooner was really upset about, didn't allow competition so much. Now we've got email, right? Now we've got blogs, the web. We've got all these protocols running on the web that itself, disrupted cable channels, TV channels, you name it, newspapers, magazines, right? No longer do you need access to gatekeepers to get your word out. You're able to put up a website. And now with Web3, you don't necessarily need access to gatekeepers to build your fintech solution. You can also, just like with Web 2.0 or 1.0, put out your thing somewhere and the entire world has access to it from day one. And they decide if they want to use it with their own wallet, their own thing. So I find that to be extraordinary. I think technology, people underappreciate just how much it has brought down costs and empowered the individual. One last example is that what we're doing right now with Zoom, which by the way, we don't need to use Zoom these days. We could use all kinds of decentralized solutions to record this. But Zoom works over VoIP, voice over IP, right? And what has VoIP done just in the last 20 years? It has brought the cost of phone calls down from $3 a minute, maybe internationally, to video in high definition, almost for free. And the reason it did that is it cut out the middleman, essentially made the packets go over any wires that are the cheapest. And so essentially AT&T became dumb pipes along with everyone else. Whereas before it was a monopoly that the government had to come in and break up Ma Bell. Now, all of a sudden, because of technology, there's no need for government to act because we have open source and open protocols that route around expensive things. So those are just some examples of how I've seen technology bring down costs and empower individuals. And I think that's a great segue. Maybe Dave, you can talk about the product and technology of it a little bit as well.
Sure, yeah. So just to kind of start from the beginning, I kind of got on board with this project by being one of those people that responded to Andrew's tweet and getting involved in the project. And at the beginning, I really just thought it'd be a good way to connect with smart people and kind of get my feet wet into an exciting project. And it's really just turned into much more than that. I kind of came in with the passion for disrupting kind of the government systems. There's got to be a better way to do it, right? And we always talk about that the demand is there. People want this. It's just someone's got to do the work, and the scope of work is pretty significant, and the problems we have to solve are pretty challenging. But that being said, going through those motions, right, there's a better way to implement that to protect data security, to not have Facebook tracking you across the web, right? And that's really at the core of your internet identity, is that these large identity providers own most of your information, if not all of it, maybe more than you think they know. and then also correlate those data points across different things. Whenever you're logging in with Facebook, they know that you're using that application. They know everything that's being sent there. So we don't want to introduce that technology that people are being accustomed to, that they really strive for and want with interacting with government. But there's a better way to do that through technology like verifiable credentials, where we're really self-sovereign, giving people ownership over their information and allowing who can see that and who's kind of tracking them across systems. So that's really at the core of our product, right? Is to enable civic engagement in a better way that people really want, but do that with holding data security and trying to do it with modern technology to keep the government moving forward.
Fantastic. I love it. I think for the viewers out there, we're going to go through Web 1.0 and then 2.0 and 3.0 to kind of keep it organized. There's all these different eras of evolution in the web. One thing about language, I just realized as you were talking, you said disrupting the government. And every one of these revolutions brings a sort of language to it that's a little bit, cheeky. I remember when people, TechCrunch disrupt, right? That was the thing.
Yep.
And it's like, just if you think about that wording though, I'm always like trying to be positive, right? And I'm almost like coming from this where I remember when crypto used to mean cryptography, right? And people, even the government had problems with cryptography, whereas like considered munitions. And this guy, Phil Zimmerman, had to export PGP in a book because of free speech, because they wouldn't let him do it another way. So there's always these problems, but then the industry comes and they're like so bold, they're like, we're going to disrupt the government. To me, when you use language of that, it's almost like, well, people might be afraid because they're like, oh, you're disrupting things and you're disrupting things that work. The government currently works for us. It works badly maybe, and it's corruption, but you're disrupting things. The trains are not going to run on time, right? Things are going to get disrupted. So I just want to say, like, I love the language of sort of collaboration, like improving 2.0, right? Like, in other words, we take what works and we make it better, because even with the Forward Party, when I talk to the Forward Party, like we're taking on the two-party system, right? You're essentially creating a bit of a pushback from some people who go, well, you're taking away votes, or you're doing this, or you're doing that, and two-party system works for us. What are you doing, right? And I told them the same thing. I said, you're actually doing what Steve Jobs did. He was riding around the subway. He saw people using the Sony Walkman, which was very limited. It had 12 songs. You had to rewind every time. And he said, I have a computer company. We could do 100 songs at the time. We could do 1,000 songs, way better. And there's random access memory, and you could easily just write the songs. What he didn't say is, we're taking on the music industry, we're disrupting them, we're killing them, right? And that he accomplished an evolution where the music industry had to adapt. But he sat down with the execs. And then with AT&T and iPhone, he literally like chose a partner and he said, we're going to give you exclusive access for a year. People lined up, they got AT&T plans for a while. AT&T was really happy. And now he's disrupted the whole industry. But my point is, right, it's evolution. And I see this in every era. Like Facebook took the word friend, it took the word like, and it kind of cheapened them a lot, because like my friends used to be people I could call up, like, help me move. None of my like Facebook friends I think of that way, right? There's my real friends, and then there's the Facebook friends. People say, can you please like this or like that? It doesn't really mean like anymore, right? It just means like, click, right? So it used to be people call up, wish you happy birthday, and now they just like type things. So my point is, in every generation, there is sort of this, like in Web3, there's this idea of shilling, right? And they used to say, oh, let's shill this project, this meme coin, that meme coin. And I'm like, shilling implies that you don't believe in the project, right? So anyway, I just wanted to kind of, I know it's a sidebar, but I just wanted to.
Let me echo your thoughts, all right?
Yeah.
Because there's a phrase I use fairly frequently, and that is, it's a pretty simple phrase, and that is words matter. So I try to be mindful of the words that I use, the words that I speak, and the words that I write down, because words matter. And even when I said I lean towards that libertarian point of view, I immediately thought of, I don't want then to be boxed into a labeled Eric Starr is XYZ, because I'm not one thing. I'm not one thing. What motivates me isn't wealth creation or being the boss, that's not what motivates me. What motivates me truly is, and it sounds so ridiculous, but just to make lives of people better. And we can do that with technology. We can do that. We can we can deliver solutions that make it better for everybody. There's a quote from Thomas Sowell, the economist. He says, "There are no solutions, only trade-offs." And that is true. I think it's true in the big picture, but it's absolutely not true at the micro level. Meaning, you can be better without necessarily a trade-off on smaller things, right? In a business building environment, you'd be like, well, if you want to build things quickly, you need lots of resources, call it money, right? I mean, you may have heard that, right? You want to go quick, you need a lot of resources.
The triangle, yeah, you can have two, but not all three.
Right. But when we think about like smaller problems to solve, right? Can we make it easier for you to get a driver's license and preserve your own data privacy at the same time? Yeah. Now you could say, well, the trade-off is maybe there are fewer people working at the DMV. Like I said, the big picture, the macro, I tend to agree with the quote that there is no solutions, only trade-offs. But at the micro level, using technology, absolutely. You can do things where it's this like win-win-win-win-win solution type of thing. So I'm mindful of words. And I want to make it clear that what we're trying to do is really just make things better. It's not, well, because what I have been faced with over the years is when I speak about what we're trying to do, somebody will say, yeah, but what about that? What about that? And pointing out like the shortcomings of something that is sort of kind of related, but not what I said, instead of
exactly.
Yes, and we can do this, and yes, and we can do that. It's just it's that mindset that you're talking about, which leads to words matter. The way in which you present an idea is essential, because either you're bringing people in or pushing people away. And at the end of the day, who's against just making things easier and better? Nobody's against.
That's exactly it. How do you present things? How do you get people inspired? There's always mathematically, the more your message goes out there, every new person is a chance to either like it or not like it. So mathematically, the more people you put out, it's almost mathematically impossible to please everybody, right? Because you literally would have to multiply it, the probability. Let's say the probability is 99% that you please people, right? But as you reach 1,000 people, that's 99% times 99%, since 99% eventually reaches below 50%. So there's always going to be people who, and those people are then going to say, twist your words, or even worse, sometimes co-opt your words for the opposite of what you're talking about, right? And they're going to say, oh, disrupt the government. That's what we want to do. Down with the government, accelerationism, kill everything. Things are bad, burn it to the ground. We need a new system. And that could be the Bitcoin guys. It could be the socialist guys. It could be whatever guys or girls or anybody. So the thing is, like, you got to be mindful, yeah, of how we present it, because you attract the movement that you'd like to see. And I see a lot of times these new ideas, including with the Forward Party, that has very good ideals that I stand behind, you know, data-based governance, universal basic income, stuff that I've been putting years of my work and my life towards. But you need to also address, like, we're not taking on the two parties, you know, to completely cheat. No, we are representing the people, right? The people need a vote. They need a choice. They need, you know, it's like a 2.0 system, right? It's a 1.5 system, whatever it is, but we're improving, exactly what you're saying. And yeah, maybe in the big picture, there are trade-offs, although I will go out and say, I think economists like Thomas Sowell may be overstating the drawbacks, okay? I do think there are drawbacks. I think that when libertarians say that A and B make a deal, A and B are better off, that's true. But C and D may have lost out. Maybe now I hired an overseas developer and a local developer is not going to have a job. And so the A and B are sometimes the C and D for some other deal. And sometimes it's a zero-sum game. So these guys win at the expense of those guys, but then those guys win at the expense of these guys. And it's a fixed pie, right? So there's not necessarily always, because the two parties pairwise are better off. that the whole system's better off. Sometimes you're just running in place. And sometimes you're moving backwards, like if you are destroying ecosystems, right? Or farmland or soil gets depleted or whatever, right? Or you're polluting the environment with plastic or whatever it is, chemicals, right? Then you may be winning here, but you're right, in the grand scheme of things, you may be incurring a larger problem that may lead to ecosystem collapse, which may not even be solved. You can't even go back from that necessarily. So we do have to be mindful of the big picture, but I think some solutions are just unmitigated wins, and that's when things get more efficient. Like I'm talking about using less energy, pushing more bits, like this video conferencing that we're doing now. It's probably using the same amount of energy as AT&T was using to move the phone calls, but it's much more efficient in how it packs the data. So I think there is no trade-off when you're actually moving from a brute force solution, like I'm going to say Bitcoin was the first and brute force solution to double spend problem, to solutions that are essentially taking the mathematics and what we've learned and like improving it with almost no trade-offs sometimes. So I think there are tons of solutions like that, and we'd be foolish not to improve things with almost no downside, you know.
Agreed.
All right, let me share my screen, and I'd love to sort of get into it, get into the nitty-gritty of identity, of permission, as well as civic engagement, right? Because part of identity is not just that we can identify ourselves, but what can we do with it, right? And so I just want to go back a little bit. Earlier this year, so I have two companies, qbix and Intercoin. qbix has been around for 10 years. If anybody knows, we build open source alternatives to big tech. Okay, so essentially Web 2.0. If I would have to say, it's like this, just a quick overview. qbix builds alternatives to big tech, Intercoin builds alternatives to big finance, right? So we've already done this. We've already released a lot of communities that you can essentially come, including the one for Andrew Yang 2020 app. You can come, you can have your own social network. And now we're talking about Web 3.0, which we're going to get to, and it's about having a autonomous network where you don't have a landlord, or rather your landlord is an autonomous network that doesn't have a profit motive necessarily. It doesn't try to extract rents or anything like that. It just tries to serve the people with transparent rules, and then people decide what they want to do. So here's an example of a social network that we built. You can see people's interests, you can talk to them. And if you log in, you can, well, for example, you could, this is a time capsule of Andrew Yang's network that we built for his decentralized campaign, let's say, the Yang Gangs. And what we're doing here on Zoom, we could do here on the site. And the difference between Zoom and the site is that the site is owned by whoever, it could be hosted anywhere, right? If they kick you off, you can go somewhere else. So in a way, it's essentially you choose your landlord. You go from what we call digital feudalism, where today's world, you have to choose Google or Facebook or Microsoft, right? Even such a simple thing, right? If I asked you guys, like, I want to collaborate on a document with you. We're in school and I just want to collaborate on a document, right? What would you use? Like literally I come to you, I say, hey, let's collaborate. Let's make a document together. What comes to mind? Like what tool could you use for that?
Microsoft 365 or Google Docs.
Or G Drive, yep.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And so everywhere you turn, if you open your mind, you're seeing a feudal society, which is essentially what our society was before capitalism, right? It was, in a way, it was like, choose a feudal lord, you're the serf there, and you hope that the feudal lord takes care of you nicely. And if you don't, you go to another feudal landlord, right? And you hope that they're going to let you take your data out of there, put it in the next one. But you don't get the back-end software. You don't get anything really. And like you said, the identity, like if I go to NewYorkTimes.com and I can log in, I'm probably going to log in with Google or something like that, right? I could subscribe. That's one of the business models, is I could pay. But if I wanted to log in, I think I'm already logged in here, but I would have to use, let me do incognito mode just really quickly. I think that would then invite me to log in, right? And how do I log in? Well, I can log in with Google, with Facebook, with Apple, right? So they control my identity, or I can have a choice of landlord, which is nice. I can use my local email provider. So that's at least a nice thing. But with MetaMask, I'm able to log in without any of that. And just to introduce a little bit, let's say I logged out of here. I was just testing here. So log out. And if I get started and I want to log in with my wallet, then not only, but I'm free even of my landlord, the nyu.edu or whatever it is. See, I just sign this phrase with my private key, and that identifies me to the site. So that right here is an example of signing in. Of course, I can have as many private keys as I want, as many identities as I want. So we're going to get into things like Sybil attacks and people having multiple identities. But just the idea of having a private key, being able to be responsible for it. If I lose it, it's my fault. If someone else gains access to it, they can impersonate me. That's very different than having the bank or Facebook or someone else manage your identity. So just wanted to throw it out to you guys. What do you think in terms of like personal responsibility, first of all? If somebody is responsible for their own identity, right, their own private key. We've heard people say that they've misplaced their keys. You know, how many people have said, I lost my Bitcoin, I have millions now, but I can't reach it. And even worse, there's sometimes people that are being impersonated. So what they've done in the traditional space, just to describe, right, the traditional space is what they've done is called, was it identity theft? I think they had an act which basically came down on the federal crime, and it uses the violence, right? The government is trying to use force, and they've been very successful. I think identity theft is even if it does happen, the credit card companies are able to roll back transactions, which is another thing, because it's all managed, right? It's managed by the credit cards that they give you a way to roll back things, and the banks. It's managed by the government, which goes after the people and makes sure to punish the people who even attempt to do this. That's the current system we have. It works rather well, but we still have people's identities leaked all the time. So the question is, what can you do if things are leaked, as they will necessarily be leaked? What can you say about that? Because obviously the last thing I want to say about this is, if the data is all concentrated in one place, in one database, like massive data leak, almost all Brazilians just this year, all their hospital data, okay, has been leaked, right? Now, their identity, though, is being stored in their own MetaMask or their own private keys, right? So you cannot leak this in massively as you can leak these other things. So we know that, but what if one person does get it leaked? How do they feel? What is the recourse for them if they've opted into the self-sovereign system? Can you guys talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we were kind of talking about improving systems and improving things with some trade-offs, right? People are used to convenience now and not having to manage and worry about that. And the trade-off being that all this data is centralized, and if these entities do get hacked or breached, right, it's just like a large honeypot of user data. On the other side, if we do self-sovereign identity, those users own those private keys, all of their information, on their own digital wallets, right? Their responsibility goes up. So those are kind of the trade-offs there. But if you really kind of come down to what the matter is and what we're talking about, and holding those private keys in the context of what UltraPass does, those verifiable credentials living in your digital wallet, there's really no difference of having your driver's license or your credit cards or whatever, right? But there is a process to recover that. Should you lose it or misplace your wallet, or your wallet gets stolen, you can cancel those, right? So there needs to be some sort of key recovery process, whether that is proving your identity again to that entity that provided you with that credential or provided you with that private key. Just like when you lose your credit card, you go back to, Capital One, whatever it is, right? And you get reissued one. So there just needs to be a path for that. And then in regards to those centralized kind of honeypots of user data when I do own my identity, right? It's just lowering the PII exposure of these companies. So should they get compromised, the data is kind of anonymous, right? We just have a bunch of data points on people that you can't really correlate back to who they are or whatever, right? It's masked in a sense that if they do steal all that information, maybe they have an idea of how the business operates or things like that, but it's less impactful to the actual users because their identity is protected and that kind of mapping can't be tied back to them. And also, as you mentioned, right, it's much more difficult to hack individual digital wallets than it is to target these large providers of identity.
That's right. I think.
Let me add a little bit of context.
Please, Eric. Yep.
UltraPass we're not suggesting that we eliminate all centralized stores of data. That's not what this is about, right? At the end of the day, the United States, the federal government, the state governments need to know who are citizens. I can't say I'm a citizen to the state, to the government, right? I can present a credential that indicates I am, but that needs to be verified. A verifier would need to confirm that with the issuer, which would be the government. So it's not like we're saying eliminate all data held by government. We're not suggesting that. What we are saying is the way in which you access services is done very differently. And these federated identity providers like that now are another store of data of identity that we can remove from the process and put that into the power of the individual. There's a practical way to do this, which we have already developed, and it incorporates things like biometrics in order to prove that you are you, so that you can get a credential. And then if you lose a credential, you have to go through that biometric process again in order to restore your credential. Now, Dave mentioned it. Now, the difference between self-sovereign identity and these federated identities is if you breach Apple or something, you're going to get billions of data of information, of private information.
That's right.
If you breach an individual's wallet, you're going to get one person's information. The amount of effort to breach one wallet, it's not worth it. It's just not worth it.
Exactly.
Right? For the hackers today. Now, I can't speak for 10 years from now or 50 years from now, and maybe there's a way, and technology is ever changing, and I get that. But today, this would be better. It would reduce the risk profile of private information significantly by putting it in control of an individual. Now, I know it's it's hard to explain this sometimes, but again, we're not looking to eliminate databases from governments. We're looking to put control of identity in the hands of a person as opposed to Google or Facebook. That's the difference. And that doesn't mean UltraPass is replacing Google and Facebook. We don't want the data. We're not going to have the data at all.
Exactly.
That data is going to be stored in the individual's wallet. So it is a way of removing Google from the process, empowering the individual so that they can engage with the government in a way that's much more secure and in control of the individual.
I think you've hit upon the exact thing. And just, on this show, I like to make the complex sort of understandable.
Yep.
And so, for people who might not know, a lot of these things are based on public key cryptography, also called asymmetric key cryptography, to distinguish it from symmetric key is when both parties know a secret key. And if both parties know it, then one of the parties can go leak it to the whole world. And then the other party's compromised, or their communication is compromised. The invention of public key cryptography, or asymmetric, was that essentially each party has a private key, which only they ever store, and a public key, which their partners in the communication, or really anybody, can just go publish on the web. or anywhere. And so without compromising the private key. And so there are essentially two major operations that can be done with asymmetric key cryptography. I apologize, 1 second. I think my computer froze for a second. There's two operations you can do which are at the backbone of almost everything online. One is when you sign. Let's go with this one first. You use a private key to write a message, and then, you write a message and then you use a private key to sign it. It's like the kings used to affix their seal, right, to the envelope. And there is no way for anyone else to do it unless they have your private key. We're ignoring here the idea of quantum computers and futuristic technologies that may in the future break this. And now the National Institute of Science Standards and Technology is moving forward with new asymmetric key algorithms that may be quantum resistant. We're putting that to the side. So right now, today, if you have a private key, it could be based in factoring large prime numbers. It could be based on elliptic key cryptography, curve cryptography, whatever it is, which, by the way, Bitcoin and Ethereum are based around that. Most of these blockchain signing is based on that. You're able to attest that this message was signed by this private key. And the assumption is that you own the private key. Now, if you ever wanted to become effectively anonymous, you would publish a private key to everybody. And at that point, you could have plausible deniability to say, well, this message, anything signed after that time could have been anyone, right? Anybody has my private key. So in a sense, there is also this built-in anonymity where you can, not many people think about it that way, but you can throw away your privacy, your accountability by literally saying, here's my private key, everyone, you know? And at that point, good luck figuring out whether when you've said that first and which of your messages are really yours versus someone else, you know? That's one. The other one is public key. So when people want to encrypt a message that only you can read, they use your public key. And so essentially what happens is that all this data could be stored on the internet, but encrypted with your public key so that you and only you can decrypt it on your computer. So in that way, because the data is encrypted by many different public keys, it's like you were saying, Eric, it doesn't make sense to break into just one unless it's a really important government official or something. And they've made it so strong, it's like 512 bits or whatever it is these days, right? That basically classical computers just simply cannot do it unless they worked for millions of years. And, you know, so the idea is that these two things are different, right? They accomplish different goals. And from a societal point of view, I've seen many times attacks on encryption. I have not seen attacks on signatures. I have not seen any government worry about the fact that people can prove that they wrote a message. That's usually something that everyone wants, accountability. So identity can be used in those two ways. And I want to distinguish those two ways. One is you're literally saying, I wrote this message. I am spending this money. Please send me the couch. I'm giving you the money, right? On the internet. The other is trying to hide things from other actors. And there are states like Monaco, which is a sovereign state, you know, in a way, or its principality. And also I'm thinking of Singapore and others, and Dubai, which are essentially, you could say, surveillance states. They have cameras everywhere. You can't steal anything. Many business people like to go there because it's safe, right? It's super safe. And also they have essentially banned encryption, technically, end-to-end encryption, meaning if you're using Skype in Dubai, that's technically illegal. You should be using their approved thing that has a backdoor, government backdoor. It's called BOTIM, I think, BOTIM. That's just an example. And the government, the reason is because they're worried that people are going to hide all kinds of things in there, right? It's not just how the US government is talking about in this current infrastructure bill, right? That you have to dox your users, know who they are. It's literally reveal everything, because if you encrypt anything, you can hide anything in there. So there have been attacks on encryption all the way from right now. William Barr, the previous, in the Trump administration, he was the Department of Justice guy, right? He was the chief guy. He was very much against encryption. There's people all over the place who don't like it. And so when I go into this world, I see that signatures are never the problem, but encryption is sort of a controversial thing. And I think the trade-off there are some trade-offs at Intercoin. We say that the organization has to dox itself. We have to know who is issuing the coin, but the individuals, if they're doing small amounts, buying a pizza or whatever, cash, it should be treated like cash. And so there are levels at which point you might want to require doxing because people have amassed so much power. But like I said, signatures and encryption are very different. So when you talk about identity, what do you have in mind? I just wanted to sort of ask you that, because you're absolutely right. If you gather all information in one place, unencrypted, right? That's a big honeypot. And Dillinger, the great bank robber, he would rob banks. That's where all the money was. He didn't go to piggy banks, people's houses, and take a little here and a little there. So now that you're distributing identity to the edges, right? I think you're solving the problem. You can't steal everyone's identity. What's your view on the data? So you're saying the data is going to be stored however it's stored. And those private keys could also be used to encrypt the data, but they don't have to be. So, you know.
Yeah, so I kind of equate it to, right, you have a private and public life, right? So inside your home, you assume that that's private, at least in the United States, right? So you can think of that as kind of like your encrypted world, right? You have that kind of that box that you feel safe in, you can put whatever you want in, and you're kind of assured that no one else can see that or know that unless you allow them to, right? Then you also have your public life. You walk outside your front door, you're walking down the street, you're having conversations, you're wearing t-shirts, you're blasting out information everywhere, right? People are learning things about you as you're walking down the street. So I think there's room for both of those worlds, right? And you kind of just said it right, that those organizations kind of have to dox themselves. So when we're talking about issuers, right, those issuers need to know information about you in order to engage in that relationship with you, right? They can't say, I don't know who's on the other end, I'm going to provide them services. How can you, depending on what the service is, it might not be possible, right? That you need to know information about that person. But that being said, you could have a relationship with an entity that they know certain things about you to set up that relationship, but then going forward, initial transaction, transactions after that point, or depending on what you're doing, or if you're storing information about yourself in there, that could be encrypted with your private key. So it really depends on what you're talking about, but I think there's room for both, right? And with verifiable credentials and this technology where that user's data is living in their wallet, depends what that data is. We mostly consider PII data or some other sensitive form that you're holding on to. So those entities don't even really need to retain that information. So it really lowers their exposure in terms of PII and getting kind of hacked as those honeywells of information. So you provide that information to them at transaction time. When you present that credential and log into their system, they have access to that data. But once you're done and the session is closed, they don't need to retain any of that, and they can kind of break that off, right? But maybe keeping that data that they need to do their business processes, whatever things they need to do on their side and know about their users, they can retain. But there's definitely room for both, where you could have encrypted data with them that you engage with at transaction time and when you're speaking to this entity, or the information that they keep on hand to do processes that you're not necessarily involved with, right? Backend processes, whatever it might be. But I know we're kind of talking about Web 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and that transition there, that some of those backend processes could be more visible, more auditable through smart contracts and things like that. So what they're doing with your information when you're not interacting with them. So right. It really, there's room for both, right?
I think when we talk about Web 2.0 versus 3.0, that's when it's going to get the most exciting with the most fireworks, because I feel like verifiable credentials are things that are coming out of the Web 2.0 world, and NFTs are something that's coming out of so-called Web 3.0 world. And I want to compare and contrast, but to set the stage, before I want to talk about that, the idea of user accounts is a very Web 2.0 idea, okay? Web 1.0, so let me put it this way. Web 1.0 was about publishing your information. Like I said, that was a revolution because you didn't have to go to gatekeepers. You didn't have to go to cable channels. You didn't have to go on late night TV or radio, or newspapers, magazines. You go ahead and publish your thing, and also broke down geographical barriers because of this whole, like I said, packet switching versus AT&T line, tying up the line. So you could be in Texas and you could publish your website, and all of a sudden anyone in the world, any country could go and consume your website and engage with your website. So WordPress emerged as the clear winner in terms of like adoption. 40% of all websites in the world are hosted on WordPress. Websites in the world. So clear winner. We're trying to do the same with qbix. Our aspiration is to be the WordPress of Web 2.0. So what is Web 2.0? Web 2.0 says, rather than just having your blog, like the one that we have here, qbix, what's the extent of user-to-user interaction on the blog? Well, you can leave comments, right? You can talk and reply to other users. And that's not nothing, but it wasn't designed to be the sort of thing like the Andrew Yang thing that we have, which is literally things like events, payments, rides. You can drive each other. If you're in a rural area, you can go ahead and do that. You can check in, right? You have QR codes, you can scan. All the kinds of things that we now appreciate are usually Web 2.0, right? Including the payment system of Web 2.0 is tied with the banks, right? It's tied with the Stripe, which makes it easy, PayPal, others, authorize.net. The thing about that is you have user accounts, right? This is your user account. You come in, you have your conversations hosted by the server. You have audio, video hosted by the server. You have essentially, your personal information and so on. All of it is hosted by a landlord. You choose the landlord, but they still own it, right, in their database. Web 3.0 moves beyond user accounts. It basically flips the story, right, and says that you have the account and you can choose to enable it on some site, on some DApp, right, like Uniswap or whatever. And you can connect it. And then once you've connected it, right, you can basically go ahead and use it. And this website is just an interface to the blockchain. I may as well use any website and use this. If this one goes down, I could use some other site, but no one can stop me. And I've got my thing. So if there's no user accounts, how do you enforce quotas? How do you make sure a user doesn't use too many resources? And that's where cryptocurrency comes in, right? You've got a bunch of anonymous users, but as long as they have enough Filecoin, they can store enough files, right? And as long as they have enough Ethereum in their wallet, they can do operations and use gas fees or whatever. And so you've got these two extremes. On the one hand, you've got a centralized entity that determines everyone's accounts and how much their quota is for the, like how many articles you can read, right? New York Times determines and limits you in how much you can read, or anyone. On the other hand, you can read as much as you want, but you need to have enough New York Times coin to go ahead and try to reach it. And there you don't need any identity, almost like, and the problem there is that a person can have unlimited numbers of accounts and unlimited, if they're really rich, they can do a lot more. They can go ahead and vandalize Wikipedia because they can always rebuy their Wikipedia coin if they get penalized, right? You vandalize, you lose your Wikipedia coin, you're punished. You show up with more Wikipedia coin and you keep messing with the system. So in centralized systems, there's sort of a bit of, you can have a democratic sort of one person has as much as any other person. You can sort of have a little bit of a, control there. With crypto, when somebody has so many accounts, the problem is they haven't solved this problem, right? Basically, you could be 100 people. And so like there's all this in between, but I just wanted to set the stage. So Web 2.0 is about trusting the landlord to like keep things orderly. And Web 3.0, there's one landlord for everybody. And they're kind of just saying, as long as you have the money, it's a free market, do whatever you want. So what do you guys think about sort of these two approaches? Which one is the identity verified credentials more on which side? And like, what do you see as the trade-offs for what you're trying to do with civic engagement as well?
Yeah, so I kind of see it as a transition, right? So the way we're looking to implement verifiable credentials and things is very much leveraging the existing standards of the day, right? To not, like we talked about earlier, use that word, disrupt people's comfort and convenience in using the web, but to really offload and outsource the identity portion and responsibility that comes with to that end user. So you were talking about people are bringing, in Web 3.0, you're bringing your account to the site, but then there's really no governance beyond that because you're the one completely in control of your resources and how you can interact with the site. Where with verifiable credentials, right, you're giving the user the account essentially, but in regards to the application, it's still kind of operating as normal, where there's that central entity to say, hey, this, user identifier is abusing something, whatever, we need to get rid of them. They're still in control of kind of their domain. So it's really that shared responsibility model where the user is in control of their key, their personal information, whether or not they want a relationship with that entity. But then the application is also in control of saying, hey, I can block this user identifier, right? It's not necessarily, hey, Dave Boulet's on my site. It's this user identifier is coming over and engaging with my site. I can't see their information, but I know they're interacting with me. So I can block their access, if needed. And then on the identity side of that, the governance comes in with the issuers, right? The issuers need to know the information about the user. They're kind of who really says that this person is valid. The holder of the credential is it's still valid. It hasn't been revoked. There's no abuse there. We know it was issued by us, and we can verify that.
Yeah.
I would echo what Dave just said. We're not, when we think about our mission, right, which is to simplify and accelerate civic engagement, it's broken. I don't have to do a survey of people in the United States to say, hey, is our government systems efficient and working for you in a simple way? I don't need to do that survey. It's been done. We know everything is broken. People are very disgruntled in aggregate, everywhere, across every demographic, with how one engages with the government. I want to be, we're not jumping ahead to a completely decentralized government solution here. That is not what we're doing. You talk about Web 1.0, like some government systems are Web -2. I mean, so there is we can simplify things leveraging verifiable credentials, blockchain, public and private keys to put control in the hands of the individual, to make it much easier to engage with the government. At the same time, make no mistake about it, we do need to work with the government to modernize their systems as well. It doesn't happen. When we originally started talking about this, we were thinking about basically connecting to stuff that's just really bad, like really old technology. And when you sit back and think about it, it's like, well, if you really want to solve the problem, solve the problem. So part of what we do is, yes, we provide users with access to a digital credential, and they can go through a biometric process, have it verified by a government agency or institute, and that driver's license or digital credential can sit in your wallet. Now, I will say, but you can then use that digital credential to access any number of solutions across a variety of different agencies. So it's going to simplify things, and that's where the blockchain component comes into. That's where we need to migrate some of the technology, the infrastructure of governments, so that we can facilitate that access. So there's a lot of work to be done. That's why this is a big problem. But what we're not doing right now is saying we're going to go decentralized Web3 government. That's not what we're about. We're about empowering the user, simplifying access. And these are, I wouldn't call them baby steps. These are monumental shifts in the way in which we engage, but it's not going to the bleeding edge. We got to get to like old stuff before we can get to innovative, before we can get to bleeding edge. And we're going to start with with digital identity and empowering the user to do that. And we're going to work with governments to bring them up to speed so they can start building machine learning and AI to really make things much, much, much better.
I think that it's worth it to go into the technology and the applications of it, of digital identity. So there's two separate things. The first is establishing the digital identity. What is it? How do you track a person across sites, but at the same time give them privacy, right? That's one thing. Another thing is, what are the applications of this technology? You can use it for voting. You can use it for receiving a universal basic income, perhaps, and so on. I want to talk about how do we make sure that each person has at most one account? And also, how do you make sure that each person has at least one account? In other words, exactly one account. If you're a homeless person, you might not have a phone, right? How do you reach that person? If you're a disabled old lady, there's been talk about voter ID, right? And so how do you get to the polls? Or can you vote from your phone? And all these things. So before we get into those applications, I wanted to present sort of 2 or 3 different identity solutions, if you will, that have been around. And you probably have a lot to say about them. So one is verifiable credentials. Obviously, these are, hold on, my computer, give it a second. Okay, so they used to be called verifiable claims. Basically, some entity makes a claim. You went to the doctor, you took a test for HIV or the coronavirus, it came out negative. Who took the test, right? Who's putting their name behind it saying the test was taken and this was the result? Which lab, right? That could be signed. It could be signed by the lab, it could be signed by the doctor, it could be signed by both. Now you have that in your hand. And presumably it won't get revoked because that particular thing happened in the past. And it's not like it's subject to change in the future. So those kind of verifiable credentials can be stored in your Apple wallet or in your browser, perhaps, or something like that. We'll talk about the infrastructure for storing and presenting it. But the idea is when you start using verifiable credentials to make up your identity. So just to many people say, I'm a husband, I'm also a father, I'm a brother, I have different roles in different relationships. And so you also have relationships to the DMV. You have the relationships to New York State. You may have relationships to Texas, to Starbucks, right? You're a customer and so on. So if your relationship is an organization, they can easily update your status from this member, platinum member to super platinum member or whatever, or demote you. Now that means the previous status was invalidated, right? And so Web 2 deals with that differently than Web 3. Web 2 deals with that by essentially having a federated system of certificate authorities, I think, right? Basically, when I go to IBM.com, the reason that I know I'm dealing with the real IBM servers and not some person who just decided to get the domain IBM.com is that there's a second channel, side channel. I go to some digital root certificate authority, and they give me a certificate that says IBM.com belongs to me. And then these browsers typically trust, 10 or so root CAs, certificate authorities, and they delegate in this hierarchical fashion. When I want to invalidate one of these certificates, right, it goes up the chain and someone in authority has to invalidate it, if you will. That's the Web 2.0 way. I want to stop there for a moment and just also say that they've broadened the concept of how you present the identity, and they've, I think, abstracted it away. So one important thing is, I'll just put this up there really quickly. WeFunder.com. The reason I put this up is because there's a picture on here. So qbix is doing a crowdfund, and it's my co-founder as well. If we go down here, you could see myself and him in 2014. This is Tim Berners-Lee. This guy helped to create this thing here, the DID, decentralized identifiers. I actually tried to get him to work with Intercoin. He did for a while, but then he had to leave because he was working on this DID thing, and he succeeded. And now DID was a big thing for a while. So DIDs are essentially what is used also in ION. And so this guy right here at Microsoft was working for years to He fought for the web at Mozilla, he says. He's a voluntarist libertarian. And then he started decentralized identity at Microsoft. He got essentially all these guys at Microsoft. Microsoft has very many researchers, famous one would be Leslie Lamport, okay, for decentralized systems. So a lot of these researchers came together and they made a tree, it was called a side tree protocol, that is rooted in a blockchain like Bitcoin, which is what they chose. It could be any blockchain. And it essentially helps you to update your identity and your verified claims, let's say, over time. So this technology is sort of like the next gen thing. It's not cryptocurrency at all. There is no transferring of tokens, but rather it's about your identity and how it evolves over time. So I started out by saying you have some you have some credentials that are claims that are never changed, like you've attended this school at this time and you got this degree. Then you have some, like your status in an organization, that can change. And then you've got the side tree protocol to essentially track that. And you guys could talk about Microsoft's ION network, how it uses it. So is that what you guys use? Like, how did you decide on what technology you're going to use? And what do you see as the proper solution to these problems, I guess, of like identity evolving? What is identity, and like how do you track it at UltraPass?
Sure. Yeah. So we're leveraging Microsoft's implementation to interact with the ION network. So it's an abstraction layer from us, and we're just kind of leveraging that. But in terms of managing credentials over time, right, you're exactly right. There is those credentials that don't change, that just get sent by those issuers. And then verifiers, hey, I need to see, did you graduate from this college? What degree did you have? Did you work for this employer? Any of that information, right? And you could present that credential as the holder, we see on the screen. You present that to the verifier as the holder. They look it up on the blockchain, and based on the issuer decentralized identifier that's associated with, they can validate that credential was indeed issued by the verifier or issued by the issuer, and it's still valid. It hasn't been revoked, it hasn't expired, and you can kind of take that as a source of truth, right? Now, in terms of an identity changing over time, right, it's really in the responsibility of the issuer to maintain that state. So they're the ones, and we talked about it before, right? You're having some sort of governing entity, and I don't mean necessarily a government, but some sort of governing entity of a relationship. So, you know, when you're born in the United States, you get a birth certificate that instantiates your name. That kind of starts the relationship with the country. You're a citizen of this country, that kind of stuff, right? So your identity starts somewhere, and it starts with someone, right? I know we're all things walking around on this planet and whatever, and we're kind of here in the physical world, and no one really instantiated that. But in terms of who we are in society, someone dictates that, right? Someone says you are who you are, and then obviously there's some sort of claims that you self-assert to yourself to say, you know, I am interested in this. This is what I do. This is who I am. Those kind of things, right? But long story short, the issuer is the governance of that entity in that relationship. So when your identity changes over time, say you change job positions, or with the government, you switch addresses, you move somewhere, that data changes, right? When you're going through that process to really establish those changes, depends on how the issuer wants to do it, but they could revoke that credential. So it's like a stamp in time to say, you know, you talked about when keys were leaked, hey, after this date, I can't trust that this person, this was me, and it could be anyone else, right? So same thing, when they go through that process to really officially change those data points and that information with the issuer, they can revoke that credential. So it stays in time to say that credential was issued, it's documented there, but it's always referenced as an out-of-date, expired, revoked credential. And then a new one is issued with the new data points, right? And
I have
that
one question. Just wanted to sort of cut you off. I just want to ask the question about that. Who decides to repudiate this credential? That's an interesting question, because like I see on Wikipedia, it says the VC model, verifiable credentials model, places the holder of a credential at the center of the identity ecosystem, giving individuals control of their identity attributes. But you've just said that the issuer could revoke it. So my question is this. Is there ever a point where the issuer could revoke it, but the actual holder doesn't want to? In other words, they don't believe their identity has been compromised, right? but the issuer doesn't want them to be a member anymore because you're not paying or whatever it is, right? I think that to me is the crucial question, because that leads down the rabbit hole, right? It opens up the can of worms. Is like, what if they disagree? What if I say the issuer shouldn't be a gatekeeper and restricting me, right? And as long as I'm a citizen, right? I have rights and blah, 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 right? You can't revoke my rights. Like the United States can't just like unilaterally strip me of my citizenship, although there are some processes which they can. So like those, that's the kind of the question is like, how secure are you as an individual in this relationship? And what is the power dynamic there, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, by the way, that's a big question that I don't know that we're going to solve in this meeting, but I will say this. I mean, in this big, what the user can control is whether or not they are presenting that credential to a verifier, right? And you can pull that back anytime you want. Now, if you present it to a verifier over chain goes and confirms that the credential presented is in fact legitimate by way of cryptography through blockchain, through ION. Now, the information that is in that credential can be changed by the issuer. It can be. Now, you use the point, well, can the government say you're no longer a citizen? Yes. That's not something we're solving right now. Now, there are rules of the road, right? We can say we trust nothing, nobody ever, we don't trust the government, we don't trust anybody, in which case this whole thing falls apart, right? There are rules, there are no rules, it's chaos, in which case there's nowhere for us to go. We're not starting from that premise. There are rules, right? You don't show up to vote one day and they say, well, you're no longer a citizen. It just doesn't happen. It could happen, right? You can go down that rabbit hole. We're not going to go down that rabbit hole. Let me give you a different example of what we can fix, right? What we are solving for. And that is, and Dave alluded to it, is you're employed. You have an employee employee card that's issued by your company. It says you're employed. Now that card can be a digital credential that lives in your digital wallet. You can share it with the state employment office, okay? When you lose that job, your credential now says you're no longer employed. Essentially, we can almost automate that once you lose your job, you receive unemployment insurance because the credential's verified through blockchain, right? It was issued to David Boulet. It was issued by UltraPass. UltraPass terminated Dave. The credential that Dave is now sharing with the employment office says I'm no longer employed. The state employment office goes and confirms that he's no longer employed. You qualify for benefits because the rule's been satisfied, you get paid. It becomes instant. That's a lot different than the way the process works today. That's the kind of thing that ION allows us to do. That's the kind of thing that digital identity allows us to do in a very practical way that heretofore was a very complicated thing to solve.
So I don't want to, before I get into Web3, which I think would be the most sort of challenging part of this, because it would almost like open up questions of like, how are NFTs different than verifiable credentials? I'm reminded of movies like Minority Report, where essentially you get recognized based on your biometrics wherever you go. And, you know, according to you, the scene, I think according to anyone, the scenes are unrealistic, where he breaks back into his original police headquarters using eyeballs his old eyeballs. Well, they should have revoked his credentials, right? Yep. Really bad operational security there. But look at this. So part of the movie is he walks through with his own eyeballs, and they you know, greet him everywhere he goes. They know it's him, and then he gets new eyeballs and they greet him as someone else. It's a very cool little thing. And by the way, as far as copyright, playing things with, in order to comment on them is fair use. So I just want to say, it's interesting because if your identity is the same across all domains, you get this weird thing. And, I just want to quickly touch on it. Apple privacy, right? Apple advertising and privacy was a big thing in the last couple of years, and really pushed the entire industry into removing the idea of one identity across everything, right? You don't want to necessarily be tracked about it. And like with qbix, we've been talking about this for years, way before Apple, way before anybody. I'm not going to get into it here on this show, but I just want to say, like, the idea that when you arrive at a site, you have to constantly log in, you have to get your own account again, right? That's tedious. The fact that you have to get a subscription New York Times just to read a couple articles, cryptocurrency solves a lot of that problem, but then who pays, right? That's another thing, is who pays. So like right now, what happens is typically there is a central company like us or whatever, and then we pay the developers, we pay for the hosting, and communities pay us. In the next iteration, what would happen is the communities are at the center and they have users, but then they pay the developers, they pay the hosting with these micro payments. People could go from site to site to site, and their identity would be completely sort of contained. So like you got on this doctor's site, and inside you could see your avatar, you could see your address, you could see directions to the doctor's office, but the doctor's site doesn't know this information. And we achieve that using iframes. These are things where we render your information back to you from your own server, but the enclosing website only sees your ID that's local to that website. So like, for example, it could say, hey, Greg, welcome to your New York Times. Here are your friends. Here's what your friends are reading and talking about, articles. But the site doesn't know that your name is Greg. It doesn't know the names of your friends or anything about your friends. However, it can refer to you and your friends through IDs that the site uses to refer to them. But your IDs are different on each site. So you cannot be tracked necessarily, but you get this seamless experience that you see your name and your friends everywhere you go. So you get the experience as if you're on Facebook, but it's like that. And then of course the payments are not done through subscriptions and paywalls and all this stuff, which is tedious, but it's also done in the same way that your data is done, meaning when you arrive in the site, the micro payments can be done with your server or with your community, similarly to how when you go on Netflix and you watch a movie, right, they pay out based on, let's say, how many minutes you watched of that movie. Let's just say that's not exactly how it happens in Netflix, but it could. They would track, in database, how much have you engaged with this, and they would pay out that way. And there's questions about that. So my point is, if you have an identity that is the same across all communities, that could be a big way to de-anonymize you and maybe reveal that you're using sex.com or porn.com and you're this person and you're watching this pornography. So that may not be something you want your workplace to know or university to know. So how do you deal with having multiple identities across different domains in your product?
Yeah, so I do want to touch on that the wording from Wikipedia that we kind of started with, that users are kind of in control of their attributes within a credential, right? And I think that's referring not to like the values, because the values are agreed upon with the issuer, right? When you instantiate that relationship, you say, here's my self-attested claims. They go through whatever verification process, whatever criteria they have to meet to say, yep, we both agree on those claims that you submitted to me. Now I'm going to issue a credential containing those claims, right? So when it says giving individual control of their identity attributes, it means who they present them to, and using those, controlling the relationships with those verifiers that are consuming those attributes, and what they're allowing those verifiers to see. So kind of tying into your point now is that, so in a Facebook world, right, when you authenticate across the web using Facebook, all those applications instantly get visibility into certain attributes and whatever, right? And they're actually kind of making some strides in that space where they say, hey, you're interacting with a new application, we're going to talk to Facebook, and here's what we're going to be able to see, right? They're now actually broadcasting that to you and saying, this is what I'm looking at. Where with verifiable credentials, It's saying, okay, a verifier wants to see this type of credential, and they want to see these type of claims within that credential. And you'll be visible to that, and you can agree, and you can revoke that whenever you want, right? So it's a thing called zero knowledge proof, right? When you're going into a bar, they say, are you over 21? They just want to know, yes. They don't want to know what your birth date is, what your address is, right? When you give them your driver's license, you're giving them name, picture of yourself, address, all that, right? They don't need to know that to know you're over 21. So that's a zero knowledge proof, right? I'm just claiming that I'm over 21, and that's a verifiable thing that they can say, yep, I confirmed through this issuer, whether it's the DMV or whoever else that is, right? But so moving into the conversation of a single account across different services, right? So we always kind of talk, we refer to it as like a top level credential. There's got to be some start of identity. And we talked about before where you're born, you have your birth certificate, you get a social security number, you instantiate a relationship with kind of a governing entity that defines who you are. So a driver's license could be a top level credential. A birth certificate could be a top level credential, right? It has to start, the chain has to start somewhere. But then those credentials can be used to instantiate relationships with other entities, right? So other issuers could trust those top level credentials to say, hey, we'd like to onboard you as an employer, but you need to prove that you're you, right? So I could present my top level credential to the employer, and the employer could issue a credential for themselves that governs that relationship between me and my employer. So that makes it much, so in that scenario, if you expand that out to other services, websites, right? It could easily get to the point where, we have dozens and hundreds of credentials in our wallet. We're not necessarily saying that. I think there's a nice trade-off there of being able to use different credentials across different services, or individualized credentials for that relationship. But the idea being that you're defining a relationship between you and a service. So you can't track that top level credential. So if I get issued one by the government, my driver's license, right? I'm not using my driver's license to log into everything, because then you're kind of back in a Facebook world, right? Where we see, oh, this identifier, we pretty much know it's you at this point, right? We know you're interacting with all these sites, and we're not necessarily getting information from those sites, but we can see usage patterns, what you do, and build a pretty good profile on yourself, right? Where using those top level credentials to instantiate a new relationship per service, you're getting a credential per service. It's almost like those local accounts you're talking about where you're logging with just your email address. You could use Hotmail or whatever, right? You're just creating a relationship with that entity. And with all the benefits of verifiable credentials, though, being able to revoke that relationship, control what you're showing them, you're kind of agreeing on certain parameters.
Well, I just want exactly. I think I'm starting to get what you guys are talking about. That if you compare this to, let's say, Facebook, with Facebook, it determines what the app will get. It's the gatekeeper, it's the landlord that's in charge of your identity, managing it. And then every site you go on, they know, right? Just like MasterCard, just like, someone issues your card, they know every purchase you've made. Whereas with this, you could do it offline. You could do it, you could be on the moon, right? It could be presenting this to a bouncer on the moon in a club, right? Bouncing up really high on the moon. But then basically the bouncer says, show me your, as of 10 minutes ago, credential. Maybe it's been revoked in the last 10 minutes, who knows? I'll take the chance, right? And nobody has to know, the issuer of the credential does not have to know that you were on the moon and that you went to this club, right?
Yep. So, so the verifier, that bouncer on the moon has to look up on chain whether that credential is still valid. So there needs to be that check. But in terms of the issuer, you're exactly right? The issuer is not involved in that process. That's a direct communication between you and the verifier or the service provider. So in normal terms of federation, right, there's an identity provider and there's a relying party. So we can kind of map those two, that the issuers are essentially the identity providers and the relying parties are essentially the verifiers. But there's no relationship there, right? Where here in a Facebook world, Facebook's the identity provider and another service, another website is the relying party, but they talk to each other behind the scenes. Where in a verifiable credential world, right, I'm interacting directly with the relying party. They're not talking to the identity provider. They just know that my identity was issued by this issuer and that it's still valid. That's all they check. That's
all they check. And I think that is the key to the anonymity, right? So there's no one database of everywhere you went and everything you did. Whereas right now, Facebook knows all of that. And I think, but I do want to push you on one thing, because I think that it's not enough to simply have it privately checked. to escape this tracking across sites. Because look at this, Facebook gives you your give them your public profile. All right. That means they give them your picture, let's say, right? Well, what can I do with the public picture? I could do a reverse search. If I took all the public pictures and I put them in a database and I looked up the person by the public picture, let's say I had put time into making this database, then by giving a public picture out, by just being able to represent the avatar, the person, I'm doxing them in a way across all sites. And Facebook doesn't really concern itself with that much, but typically if I give out any public username, picture or anything, we came across this as I was building, or I had to architect a lot of stuff at our company. And this is a big thing, is that any information that you reuse across sites, including your public picture, can be used to build a database, a reverse database to try to find you, where else did you use that picture? And so I guess my question is like, if you're verifying your credentials and they're similar across sites, or they're the same across sites, that could maybe be used to reconstruct your activity across sites. So how much of what you're giving is reused and how much is it like specific to, okay, I'm over 21, there's like millions of people over 21, right? There's like billions of people. Obviously some things like I own this specific NFT, which we're gonna get into Web3, that doxes you because there's only one of that NFT or one of three. So you're either Alec Baldwin or you're this guy or you're Mark Cuban. Like, so there's no way of getting around it. But there are these cohorts where this is huge, right? So I'm fine with saying I'm part of those cohorts. I mean, my question is more like, are you giving out any of this stuff? Public profile ID, email address could be probably reused across, you're probably not creating a new email address for everything, unless you're using Apple's sign-in service, which they create a new email address for everything. So that's, I guess my question is like, for now, what do you see as the role of presenting a different information to every site and not even having one piece of information that can be used to track you across everything?
Yeah, and I think there's, depending on the specific problem you want to solve, there's probably different ways to approach it. But I think zero knowledge proofs really come into play there, that you're really picking and choosing what data points you provide to these verifiers. There's also the opportunity, we touched on it before, to really encrypt that information with your private key. So if it's really PII, the entity doesn't really have to store that, right? They can just leverage that at communication time, and you can control either encrypting that channel or something. So when your relationship is done, they're not retaining that, right? So then they can't go after the fact and do the reverse lookup. There's also the concept too of like in your day-to-day life, right? You're walking around, you're talking to people outside of the digital world, right? You're just walking down the street, you're talking to people, right? And then they're talking to other people. So there's kind of that natural, just living in a society of kind of that data sharing, right? But I think this technology and in the digital space is exacerbated, right? Because people you don't necessarily have to physically be in the town to access that information. You can now over the web or from another country, or right. Information is just ubiquitous. It's everywhere. You can access kind of anything at any time if you're entitled to that, right? So it's really just lessening that scope. But I think through zero knowledge proofs, controlling that relationship, giving the responsibility to that individual to revoke that relationship with a verifier or a service provider, it kind of drives towards that, right? I don't think you're ever going to be able to completely eliminate it, because we touched on before, people need to know things about you, right? We can't live in a completely anonymous world. But I think we can kind of reduce the impact, reduce the blast radius of some of these issues, leveraging this technology. And it might come with Web 3.0 once we're fully there. But at least in the world we live in, people are going to correlate data. It's just reducing that scope as much as possible, to your point, to say, I know you're in this kind of large swath of this population. I can't necessarily get enough data points to define specifically who you are. And then maybe I can, but maybe that information has already changed in the time frame that I actually acquired that information, right? Because I know that's a topic of the blockchain community and things like that, right? Of hacking that encryption. We could do it over 1 million years. Say quantum computers comes in, it takes 10 minutes. If that data changed in 10 minutes, it's useless regardless of if they have it or not. So I think it depends on the specific problem and how you want to approach it. But at the end of the day, right, issuers are going to have to know information about you. It's just giving you more control of what you're providing and when you're providing it, to really reduce that scope.
I think, guys, I wanted to, so I'm going to move into the three alternatives to the Web3 alternatives. And I want to talk about mixers. I want to talk about NFTs. Before I do that, just really quickly, what if instead of identity, you used reputation? So you mentioned, we need to know things about you. And I thought about this, like, okay, this person's username is Hector Malat, okay? And they've been here since 2012, but I don't really care about this part. I care more about this part, right? The fact that they got some positive upvotes in their content. If you focus on the content that people provide, rather than who is making the statement, right? Then not only do you avoid like arguments from authority, like, oh, look, this user said this and then that. Of course, I can go and I can see their submissions and comments, and I think that's good. But what if I could do all of this without their username, right? So I don't know, they're essentially user ID number, whatever. That's all I know about them, right, on this. I don't have their picture. I don't have their username. So there's nothing really besides an ID. And then that can be used to correlate all the content that they've ever done and their reputation that they've amassed from how the community reacted to them. Like there used to be this New Yorker, do you remember these magazines, the cartoon New Yorker says, on the internet, no one knows that you're a dog. Yep. Remember that? So it's like, that was when the internet was first coming out. Remember that? That was really cool. So like, what if they are a dog, right? What if they have no human name? So my one last question about that is, what if we lived in a world where literally you use verifiable credentials, but all of them were from things like, I'm over 21, right? Like the business is open to a broad swath of people. It's not just open to 5 specific people, right? So if you're over 21, you can get in, right? If you're joining a women's gym, like, are you a woman, right? Okay, I'm a woman. That doesn't really narrow it down that much. And then, so in that sense, right, you're anonymous. And what matters is your contributions in the community. Like what matters is your reputation. And I don't really like recognize most of these usernames anyway, like it doesn't mean anything. If they were not there and all I had was like an ID, like that would be just, this forum would be just as good for me, right? So when I strip it all down, like I don't need their profile picture, I don't need their username. What exactly, why do I have to know who they are? Like ultimately, it's all about like what they can bring to the community, I guess, is my.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what zero knowledge proofs do, right? So I could have my credential, that top level credential that contains way more information than maybe one service provider needs. But in order for them to do what they need to do to provide me that service, they need certain bits of information, right? We use that bar example. I need to be over 21 to go into that bar, right? I could provide them my top level credential that has all of my claims in it. But the only one thing they could be asking me is, are you over 21? Right. And that answer doesn't entail me giving them my date of birth, that then they look it up and say, okay, yeah, we confirm that that's over 21. The only thing I come back with is I say, yep, I'm over 21. Right. So it's very similar to this, right? It could, the verifiable credential under my control living in my wallet could have David Boulet at this address, my phone number. It could have a bunch of things in it, right? Depending on what service I'm interacting with, they just need to know something about me, some criteria to provide me a service. And that could be anything, right? And based on that interaction and how that gets implemented, right? They don't actually need to know those data points. They just need to know an answer or some sort of indication that's derived from all of my claims and maybe combining them or correlating them and then give you an answer, right? And
Exactly.
then
I totally get it. I think it's very important in today's world. And, Eric, you were talking about, right now the systems are so outdated. I think people use their social security numbers as identifiers. They're literally like, you could steal someone's identity because like, okay, I can basically find out a person's date of birth, addresses, whatever, right? It's pretty easy to find out that kind of stuff. And then I could call into a bank or a credit card company that's like has lax security, right? Or I could call into AT&T and like SIM swap them. I've had so many people. I told them, by the way, this is kind of a recommendation. When you're logging into a service, don't put your email. You can put your email alias. So Gmail has these things where you have your email and then you just put a plus, and then next to the plus, you put some random string. That will prevent people from calling into that service and saying, oh yeah, I am, Greg at intercoin.org or something. So like, rather than being Greg at intercoin.org, it would be like Greg at blah, blah.intercoin.org, right? And so like the service would say, actually, we don't have such an account. They're like, what are you talking about? Yeah, we don't have such an account because the account is really Greg plus blah, blah at intercoin.org. But like, that's a system that's broken today, and people can simply amass enough information about you to call in and literally like steal your accounts, or like transfer your accounts. And then once they have your SMS, they're going to use two-factor authentication, which National Institute of Standards Technology said years ago, you shouldn't use SMS as a two-factor authentication, because it's like, so the whole thing is like, it's not even in your control. You could have the best security practices, and some person at AT&T could pick up the phone call and be like, oh yeah, I got your date of birth, I got your social security number, I got this, no problem. You got a new SIM card? Here you go. And like, next thing you know, they're bootstrapping your stolen identity from that. And they got your bank account, they got your email, they got whatever. I had that almost happen to me. I had to like put second factor on everything with, by the way, the real second factor is with your phone. It's with your OAuth, Authy, etc. Eric, what do you have to say about moving on from verifiable, the technology behind it? Do you use also authenticator apps? Do you see second factor as a factor?
It's incredibly important to the entire process, because again, what we're trying to do, or what we are doing, is simplifying the civic engagement. You need to demonstrate that you are you. And how do we do that? We put you through a workflow, and that workflow contains a combination of biometrics and authentication. So yeah, part of that workflow is leveraging authentication apps. Right now, we just use the Microsoft Authenticator, but over time, as the product and the ecosystem evolve, we'll be able to leverage any of the authentication apps, any of the wallets. We're going to be agnostic to all of those things. But right now, we use the Microsoft Authenticator app. It's superior to SMS.
Yes, very much so. So in the last like 20-25 minutes, I want to go into sort of Web3. And just as we're talking about the second factor, there are three factors, in case people didn't know. There are typically three factors that people, that the industry considers that if you have more than one factor, you're more likely to be you, right? The same you that came yesterday or the month before. The three factors are something you know, something that's in your head. So that could be a password, a passphrase, secret question, although the secret question things are usually like, what tree did you grow up on? It's like, I could easily find out like that information from your biography. So probably not, secret questions are not good. I would recommend people put their passwords in the secret questions or some other thing that's like not related to the secret question. Second thing is something you have. So homeless people have a problem with this because they don't have very much. But typically it would be things like your cell phone, it would be your card, whatever it is. And the cell phone is the best because it can answer what's called a challenge response. So, you go to an establishment, it's like the card chip. It's like a little computer in there. You used to just swipe your card, but then that number could be swiped from you, literally. Just store clerk can steal your credit card. With the chips now, the machine challenges the card. Here's a number, tell me the, sign, do something, the private key, and then that's how something you have is used. And then finally, something you are, which is biometric, which is what you were talking about, Eric. I wanted to mention that biometric by itself is probably not such a good idea because like in China, here, I'll just do this. There was a system that's going to be rolled out. It was called pay with your face. You literally just go in and they scan your face, and basically the problem with that is there's something called a replay attack. Okay, so they recorded either your face or whatever is derived from your face. Could be your fingerprint derived from your fingerprint. And then they just replay it as if you were there, right? So you walk out, the first time you pay with your face, next day, they pretend you were there. And hey, look, they scanned your face, but really your face, they've already captured everything about your face. So I think it's really, really important to combine the biometrics only with your own personal device, meaning something that you have, your phone, you can unlock it with your face, you can unlock it with your biometrics, with your thumb, and then use that device to authenticate everything else, right? And yeah, I think just for everybody out there, it's important that biometrics by itself is never used, because they'll steal your likeness, they'll steal your identity almost. And they'll probably do that anyway. My video's out there. You could probably just do deep fakes of me all day long, you know, in the future.
Yeah, so it's a great point, right? And so it kind of ties into those wallets, right, that we're talking about, where those credentials are issued, right? So in the Authenticator app that we're using right now from Microsoft, it serves as an Authenticator app as well as a digital wallet. So when you issue those credentials, they're being issued directly to the Authenticator app, you know, that portion serving as a wallet that you have to biometric into, right? In order to even open the Authenticator app, you have to provide biometrics to even operate it. And then logging into these verifiers or these relying parties or these services, it's a challenge to present your credential, right? So in a multi-factor world right now, in traditional accounts, you log in, username, password. Some cases it's an SMS text message to your phone. Some cases it's a toast notification on your phone that you have to accept. Whatever it might be, right? So it ties the verifiable credentials technology we're implementing ties directly into that. So through a sign-in process, you'd essentially scan a QR code that's presented to you from the service provider. It would transition you into your wallet or your Authenticator app or wherever you're storing your credentials, where you have to biometric to even open your wallet. And then you have to accept the challenge that they're asking you for. And in that challenge, we were talking about zero knowledge proofs, include what it's actually asking for. So when it comes in, it'll say, I want your name, I want your date of birth, whatever those data points might be, right? But it's all in a challenge that you have to accept. So you can deny that. So if someone steals some portion of it, right, and they're trying to set things up, just like you would in an SMS text world, it would come to your phone and you would say, hey, I didn't start this, I didn't trigger this, right? But there's no way for them to go through that flow. We were talking about, you know, getting a SIM card, duplicating, right? I know there's a way to duplicate your phone. So people are receiving text messages that you're getting, and unbeknownst to you, you're just operating normally. They're getting all your texts. So that couldn't happen, right? Because you have to biometric into the wallet and then accept that challenge. So by using this technology, it's passwordless. So there's no passwords floating around out there that can be compromised. And then it's multi-factor by design and by implementation.
Well, exactly. You could have, by the way, your password to unlock your phone, or you can have your biometrics to unlock your phone. But either way, once you've unlocked your phone, you need your phone. This is the second factor to authenticate everything. So your password you could have a password or a passcode that just lives on your phone, right?
Right.
And I just want to say about Web3 that, you know, I'm a straight shooter, and I say I think that the Ethereum wallets have something very major wrong with them, and that is being able to export your private key and import it in another wallet. That creates so many problems. That leads to websites that ask for your passphrase, your what is it called? Your secret phrase, right? Recovery phrase. They're literally like scammers. That first they scam you, and then somebody else comes, right? And they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, you've been scammed. Why don't you come to this official looking site and paste your recovery phrase and we'll help you," right? And then they take all of your stuff after that. And the only reason you can do that is because you can export your private key from your phrase from your wallet. And I think that's wrong. I think the ability to store your recovery phrase and the ability to export your private key is actually a big vulnerability that people, you know, do. And so Keybase and other companies like that, unfortunately, Keybase got bought by Zoom, and that kind of ended, you know, I don't think they're really doing much now. But it used to be that Keybase correctly had the correct principle. Your private keys never leave your device, right? If you have 5 devices, you should have a key chain. Each device has its own private keys. There's no way to export them ever. And you simply add your keys to your keychain. If you repudiate one of your devices, right? I think that's what Microsoft Authenticator does too. You can, and Apple and everybody, you add your device, and if you lose your device, you can revoke it from these other devices. But in order for you to sign anything, in order for you to obtain your actual private key for signing, you have to use the private keys of the device to bootstrap from. And then you get your private key to sign with. But like at no point do you have a private key that you could just like put onto 10 different wallets and paste into different websites. So I think the Ethereum ecosystem is vulnerable for that reason. And it's just like, it's not even easy to use. It would have been just as easy to use to scan a QR code on one device to authenticate another device. But they didn't do that. And
we did talk about this, a similar concept when we were wireframing this out. And there are wallets that are web-based, which is completely counter to what we're trying to achieve, right? The idea is the information lives on your phone in your digital wallet, not on the web, in the public web, in a protected, again, going back to this whole idea of a web-based wallet. So the idea is that the phone becomes, what you can control. And for those of you who are watching or listening, I get it. Not everybody has a phone. I get it. We can't solve everything for everybody. That's not what we can do right now. But billions of people do have phones, and we can make a better experience for those.
And that's what we're going to do. So, sometimes I just challenge people on the show because I want, to connect the latest stuff on Web 2 and Web 3 to what people are doing, right? And I want this cross-pollination of ideas. And that's why I always encourage everyone to join our community, community.intercoin.org, because the show only takes place over 2 hours or so. And the community are there all the time. So we have people like the CTO of Ripple, the current CTO. Back then he was the chief cryptographer. We have people from former regulators like Sarah Hanks. So David Schwartz is probably, and so on. We need this cross-pollination of ideas. And you guys obviously are very welcome to come and talk about identity or anything you want. But I think you guys are very good on being able to explain these things, and people are going to have questions. So definitely, if you can, love for you guys to pop on there. By the way, I love, Vitalik is very open and honest about his own stuff. That his blockchain is slow and expensive, and he's trying to fix it. So you see this, you see how like I was able to generate a vanity ETH address that starts with my thing. You should never use this because the website generated it for you. You understand? But like people, that's the problem with this interface and this ecosystem, in my opinion. The insecurity is that people trust websites, like you were just saying, Eric, to input their phrases and to even give them the phrases, right? No, you should be running these programs on your computer, preferably turning off your internet to make sure that the program doesn't phone home, right? So the same program you see here can be run here. It can be, what is it, vanity ETH, something like this. It's going to go to work and generate one of these addresses. So by the time I'm done talking, it's going to have an address just like the website did, right? But there it is, the address. And look, there's a private key, right? So I shouldn't use the one that the website gave me is the point, right? People got to be careful to not generate their private keys on a website. And the Ethereum ecosystem just makes it too simple to move your private keys around. So I want to get to the Ethereum and the Web3 now. I want to talk about that. I think there has been a lot of innovation in the NFT space. For those not familiar, we're talking about non-fungible tokens. I mean, you've probably been living under a rock, and I'm talking about those pet rocks that you can buy as NFTs. So NFT is basically about, what is it? It's basically a thing that you can store in your wallet, right? If you go to something like OpenSea, you can discover NFTs. The thing about these non-fungible tokens is that they are essentially something that you own and something you can transfer. Identity is not something you can transfer necessarily, right? So they're different in that respect. But the fact is that NFTs are able to be rendered in your wallet. If you have a wallet like MetaMask, there's more and more support now to show off your NFTs. There's even websites like lazy.com by Mark Cuban, which show off the NFTs that you currently have in your wallet. What interfaces exist right now for you to view your verifiable credentials? Apple Wallet, Android Wallet, or what? Like Microsoft Authenticator? Like, describe to us how a person would actually browse their credentials to even like show them to the bouncer in the first place.
Yeah, so I mean, it would be any digital wallet, but in our context, we're working with Microsoft Authenticator right now. But Eric alluded to, we want to be ubiquitous with wallets, right? So, and it would be any of those wallets, really. You'd be able to browse anything issued to you, anything that has been expired or revoked. You should be able to view. But yeah, it would just be in your digital wallet.
It'd be in the digital wallet. One of the big things at Intercoin we care about is access, right? We want to make crypto mainstream. That's our whole thing, because we feel that it's been 10 years and nothing's happening in terms of mainstream adoption, right? And when we talk about all the stuff that we do, future of money, voluntary basic income, voting on the blockchain, right? I have these articles in CoinDesk about voting on the blockchain, making sure that you can actually make sure your vote was counted with zero knowledge proofs and all this kind of stuff. All of these applications are about mainstream adoption. And so there's three principles that we do at Intercoin, and that is, let me just do this just really quickly. There's three things that we want to change about the space, okay? Because like you said, it's been 10 years, is even more, you know, Bitcoin's come out 12 years ago, Ripple's come out 9 years ago, Ethereum's come out, there's been smart contracts. Why aren't people paying with crypto in their everyday life, right? Why aren't people using it to vote? This is what they're using everyday life. WeChat replaced cash in China, right? Facebook, billions of users. Gmail, billions of users. People use like Telegram payments more than they use Bitcoin payments, right? And Telegram is not even known for payments. But like every one of these messengers has payments in it, let alone end-to-end encryption and everything else. And Bitcoin is just a database that could do 7 transactions per second. Like, there's no comparison, you know, in terms of backend. So the thing is, though, all of these are centralized. So like you were saying, Eric, it's very simple to use. And that's why people go to those as opposed to these, right? So if we are going to make decentralized work, get mainstream adoption, it has to be simple. That's the third one. The first one is that crypto has to move beyond peer-to-peer. Like, you're talking about civic engagement. You're talking about engaging with your community. You're not talking about engaging with a Uniswap liquidity pool, right? So that's what crypto is currently mostly about, right? Anonymous lending, anonymous trading, whatever. And so that's a problem. So every project that we work with and partners we work with is all about serving community, right? Getting communities. And so that talks about smart economies, that I've done in other shows, talk about how can you distribute your salaries and know who people are, run contests, right? It's also about governance. It's about roles and permissions. So NFTs, in a way, can be used to show roles and permissions. They're not transferable, but they can be used to show on chain, like, hey, I'm the controller of the currency. I am the chess club president. You know, I am someone. And the difference between the Web3 and the Web2, which I haven't got into on the show, but I think it's important to spend maybe 10 minutes on this because it's extremely important, is that the rules on the blockchain, Web3, are immutable and you can't get around them. In Web2, and we were talking about this earlier, but I want to bring it up. In Web2, there's a sort of black box, if you will. The issuer, as we were talking about, where is it here? This issuer, we're not sure according to what process they decided to issue this credential, right? You could have gone to the doctor, they could have injected a placebo in you instead of a vaccine and say that you're vaccinated. We can't obviously fix every mismatch between the real world and the blockchain or the whatever credential, but it would be nice to know that the credential was issued as a result of a process that the issuer had undertaken. And so just to going back to the communities, if you have a form of governance that says the mayor is elected democratically every 4 years, and then the mayor appoints these people, and then these people have this succession, if this person disappears for 30 days, this person takes their role and so on, then you know that this person has this role because the rules were followed, right? So there's an additional layer of trust in the process, in the, shall we say, the constitution of the community, right? So let me just kind of ask you about that. What do you see as the potential improvements beyond verifiable credentials to make people trust the issuers in the first place? And what if the issuer is compromised also? Is there a way to revoke the root certificate of the issuer or something to that effect? Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I mean, right now, what you were talking about, that in order to get issued a credential, you have to meet some sort of criteria, whatever that might be, right? So we've been working with partners to do identity verification, where you're submitting documents, selfies, they're running their algorithms and hit it with a certain level of trust to meet that criteria that you are who you say you are. Now, what you're talking about, it would be a significant improvement, right? Because it would give direct audibility, visibility into the actual process and what criteria you hit to actually get issued that credential. You're exactly right that right now it's a black box owned by those entities. I mean, what if there's a middleman attack where someone inserted themselves right in that process and it kind of didn't matter what criteria you hit, and they can issue to whoever they want. They're operating under that DID on the ION network, and verifiers are saying, yep, these are all valid credentials. How
do you recover from that in your system? How do you recover from a compromised issuer, I guess?
I mean, the way we're concerned, right, we don't govern the issuer, right? The issuer governs themselves, and they set those criteria. So we don't really care what their criteria is. They have to set that. So
that's fine. I mean, you know, self-regulating organizations is a thing. Have you guys heard of like SROs, right? FINRA is basically a self-regulating, as far as I understand, organization. So if someone decides to misbehave, they're kicked out by the other members, right? When we were thinking of doing the Intercoin Foundation, and we're talking about KYC, because we need like a Knights of the Round Table kind of like KYC providers. But if one of them starts like slacking off or just giving out, you know, because the thing is, like with Intercoin, we want people to, like I said before, dox the community, the issuer, right? We want to know that this is, we also don't, like our thing, we don't want to be involved in like the policing of it. So like the Sinaloa cartel can say, we're the Sinaloa cartel, we've passed KYC, right? And we have drug coin. I'm just giving it like a very like terrible example, right? On purpose. And we have drug coin. You could buy drugs from us using these services, right? Silk Road, I don't know, whatever it is. Now Silk Road is gone. But the point is, let's say they launch their own thing. What we want to do is make sure that everyone knows that they're Silk Road, that they are Sinaloa cartel, right? Or the Zetas. And let the Mexican government deal with them, or the Honduran government. Similarly, if there is, Haiti has an earthquake and people want to help Haiti, they want to send all this money, we need to know that it's really Haiti, you know, the community has come together and given out wallets, and these are people on the ground, and not some person in a basement that's generated a ton of wallets and claims to be Haiti, right? Because when the money comes in, it has to, people know that it has to go to the people on the ground who need it. So when we were thinking about this stuff, we saw that if we're going to make it decentralized, the KYC providers would have to police each other, and they would basically have to kick out the KYC providers that are like being crazy, just giving out, oh, you know, corrupted, like, oh, you want to pretend you're Haiti? Here you go, you know. So you would get like three or four issuers, right? And if one of them was compromised, then you need to get one additional one now, because that one doesn't count anymore. So there are like these ideas of like self-regulating organizations, and I think that's how a lot of the broker-dealer stuff works as well. And that's probably how journalism ethics works and like many other things is that they probably blacklist people who are just, but it's not done by a centralized entity is my point. It's not done by you guys or someone else.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that you touched upon. One, Dave is correct about we're not governing the issuers. That's not what we're doing, right? We're facilitating a better solution that includes issuer, verifier, and user. There's a component that we alluded to about identity verification. There are companies out there, Socure, Acuin, Idemia, Onfido. This is what they do. Now, if we were using all of them and one of them was somehow corrupted, and every time it came back that the user going through the exercise, the workflow is approved as an actual person, we would stop using them and stop paying them, right? Because it's flawed. So capitalism will still work in that context, right? If one of those companies is accurate to 50% of people going through the workflow and the others are all at 99.9, the one at 50% is not going to stay in business. They're just not. Now, what happens if they're 99.9 and then all of a sudden they're 0 or 50, right? Which is what I think we're kind of alluding to. And that is, well, if that happens, they'll no longer be used because they're no longer trusted. The trust is generated from the accuracy, not from governance of we like you, we don't like you. It's the proof is in the pudding. You're giving us bad results. It's almost like a COVID test, right? If every COVID test came back negative, but it was only 50% accurate, nobody would buy that COVID test, right? So it's the same concept with some of the participants that we are partnering with within our product, our solution.
And just to add on that, right? So the way I look at it is that these entities who are going to be issuers, it's their responsibility to foster trust with the community, right? And then the reverse side of that is those systems shouldn't really trust any of the community, right? It should be, I have to prove myself when I'm interacting with a service provider because I want that verification every single time, right? I don't want someone else to be able to come and say, hey, I'm him, and then just easily trust me, right? But the issuers themselves, it's their responsibility to foster trust with the community. So we know that when you're issuing, I can with confidence use that issued credential to go to a service provider. And when they challenge me, know that it's valid, right? So that's the kind of way I look at it. The issuers have to foster the trust, and then the service providers need to not trust the community. We don't want to trust those people. We want them to verify every single time because that's where the breaches would occur.
Exactly. No, I think you guys have it solved at the point where you present the credential, right? I would just say, obviously, present only the credentials that can't be used to dox a person really easily, and that's what you're saying, right? Don't present everything about yourself, just little slip, zero knowledge proofs, and that's amazing. And when it comes to the issuer just willy-nilly giving out all these credentials, I think that's the key, is to make sure that the ecosystem exercises judgment, that each participant in the ecosystem decides, okay, we can't accept this issuer anymore or that because they've been compromised. I think that's a lesson that the Web3 community, technology community has to learn. I think the problem with Web3 is that they push all of the information into the blockchain and make it so expensive because they make it the source of truth for everything. Like what they do is, everything has to be on chain. Okay, all sorts of, that's called the Oracle problem, right? The Oracle problem is there's something out in the real world, but the chain has no idea about it. And you have to constantly be putting info on the chain about it. The reason why all of these proof of stake, proof of work, and all these things are so expensive, and I'll talk about it in some other, I have a person coming on the show where we're talking about the consensus algorithms, and the technology of blockchain. But the lesson that Web3 has to learn to move on from from the current lack of adoption is that blockchain is expensive. And the reason blockchain is expensive is because it does essentially what is known as consensus across the entire network every few seconds or every few minutes. It's a very expensive operation. And so Vitalik admits to that, and they're moving to proof of stake. But it doesn't really get rid of the problem, which is that you store everything on chain, and then you have to do this consensus. So just really quickly, I wanted to go through the 3 things that need to happen for things to become cheaper, faster, and more adaptable. And in some ways, get back to what the Web 2 principles that you're talking about, the people verifying themselves, exercising judgment as to which issuers they will accept and which they won't. Which credit card swipe is ambiguous, and you need to take out a different credit card and pay, because you're not going to wait 2 hours for finality. Okay. The problem with blockchain is they put all the finality into the chain itself and make it super expensive. So what they do is currently blockchains, what they do is they take every transaction in the world, right? And then the miner, the computer that solves the double spend problem, needs to be aware of all of those transactions and put them into a block, and then signs the block, right? So the proof of work says they did a lot of work on top of those transactions, and they signed it with that. Problem is, all transactions in the world have to meet in one place in the world every 10 minutes, right? Every 15 seconds. Very expensive operation, whether that's proof of stake, proof of work, or anything. Now, what normally most internet protocols, Web 2.0, 1.0, are what's called sharded or partitioned. Like, you can have, right now we're having a Zoom call. There could be millions of Zoom calls somewhere else. There's no bottleneck. There's no miner that has to gather all Zoom calls in one place and figure out which is the true Zoom call or something. So this does solve the double spend problem, but it does it in a very, very brute force way, right? Let's look at every transaction and let's make sure. Intercoin already moves past it by having transactions happen in different coins, different networks, right? And then you can't find Navajo coin being double spent in another network because it doesn't exist on that other network. So already reduced the problem to essentially a 2-level solution. But my point is, this is not the only solution, but my point is, when we start realizing that the end users, the bouncer at the club, right, can exercise their own judgment as to whether to accept something or not accept something, that judgment does not have to happen on chain. And so when you move it off the chain, suddenly everything becomes cheaper and there's no bottleneck anymore. I won't get into that here, but I just wanted to say what you guys are doing is actually better than Web3 in some ways, because as long as the people are trusted to exercise judgment as to who they will accept or not accept, right? You can entirely remove this mechanism of what is essentially creating a consistent history of the world, and then creating a competing consistent history of the world, and then using massive amounts of electricity or massive amounts of stake or whatever to determine which chain is going to be continued. So in the Web3 world, what happens is all the little ambiguities in the world, like if the credit card, was it processed or not processed? Most of the time we know, 99% of the time we know it's been processed or declined. But that 1% of the time when we don't know, what blockchain does is it aggregates all of them into this chain or that chain, where here it was processed and here it wasn't processed, right? And it basically aggregates them all into such a expensive thing, right? The honeypot, it's very expensive to have all those things. And then it basically uses a lot of expensive machinery to determine where it's going to continue. So I think we're going to move past blockchain in the future, but what you guys are using is not blockchain at all, right? There is no blockchain in what you guys are currently have built, right? And are rolling out, or is there? I guess the side tree protocol uses blockchain to secure things, but the difference is that there with Ion, the blockchain is used only once in a while, right? Mm-hmm. So an entire tree of identities, unlimited number of identities can be secured by one thing. And that's very different than having a bottleneck for all transactions in the world.
Yeah, that's right. So it's like, when you get issued, the only way you're interacting with the chain is when you're issuing and when you're verifying, right? and you're only using the chain at those touch points, and it's more necessarily to verify if the credential provided is still valid. You're not necessarily doing a transaction that then has to be written back and correlated across all the nodes. So it's really just on that issuance that's valid, so that gets correlated, and it's signed with the DID of the issuer, and the verifier is just checking to see, is it still valid, right? It doesn't have to write it, however many times across the network.
What about revoking or invalidating? Does that need a transaction to be posted to the main chain?
Yes, because it needs to be detailed as revoked or invalidated.
I guess my question, can it be posted on the side tree or whatever? Can it be posted on the tree, or does it have to be posted on this central point, layer one chain kind of, is, what I mean? Like, yeah,
my understanding is it gets written kind of locally to the side tree protocol, and then it eventually rolls up. So it doesn't, it's kind of taking a little slice of the network, and then it correlates itself, and then it kind of goes up the tree.
Yeah, because that would be really cool if you didn't have to hit the layer one every time you did anything. You just hit the side tree and you batch all of those things, and then you hit the, like a Merkle tree, just put it in there, which I think is how Keybase did it as well years ago when they first started before Microsoft. So then the last thing I just want to say, and this is to your point, Eric, is that you need user-friendly interfaces, right? You need something that even homeless people can use, even grandmas can use. And if that happens, then they can vote on chain and they can do all these things on chain, right? I want to see a world where voting is cheap and I don't have to stand in line for 2 hours. Then I would actually vote in all kinds of things, right? And if it's cheap, I can have my neighborhood have access to the same machinery that currently is used by giant campaigns, like Andrew Yang's campaign or whatever. So that's the world we want to live in. But if we get to that world, it can't look like this, right? It can't look like geeky transaction IDs. So can you talk a little bit about that, about your user interface? Are you able to be embedded in websites like PayPal or Stripe or whatever? What is the current integration that you guys have? And I think that'll be the last sort of topic. It's just the user interface adoption. What do you guys have planned, and how do you plan to roll it out to the people, really?
Yeah, so we're leveraging existing protocols, mentioned it before, right? So the existing identity providers that are operating, it's a very standardized thing. It's been done thousands of times, millions of times, right? Every application using modern authentication can support it. We talked about OAuth, SAML2, things of those nature, right? So we're really embedding the verifiable credential technology into those existing protocols. So as in terms of onboarding, right? You're exactly right with on that right side there. Just be an additional one in the list, right? Sign with verifiable credentials, sign with UltraPass ID. But according to the application, there's a little bit of code to change. There's more parameters than actual code changes, but it's easy to onboard. And then to the application, it's really the same. You're just getting different claims, and that's where the kind of security aspect comes in, right? I'm not coming over as David Boulet. I'm coming over as an identifier, only with the data points that application needs to operate. So it's using the existing protocols with just a little spin of adding that additional layer of technology on top of it, removing passwords, using the authentication protocols, leveraging SideTree, and those kind of things.
What's underpinning it for the user? Are you making them download an extension, install it in a browser, like a native app? Like what exactly did they?
No, it's completely native to the application, right? It literally leverages the same integrations that a Facebook login, a Gmail login, or any of that would leverage. It's just all that happens kind of in between where the application gets issued a token and what the criteria was to actually receive a token. So instead of going to a website, signing with Facebook and logging in with a username and password and then hitting sign in, and then all that kind of back and forth between the identity provider, the relying party that happens when you sign in with a username and password, that's kind of what's changing, right? So instead of signing username and password, you'll be presented with a QR code that you scan, and that will issue that challenge to your wallet, and it will say, hey, I'm looking for this type of credential with these claims. You accept that and go through that multi-factor authentication process we talked about earlier. And then once that's done and you've submitted it, the verifier will kind of start talking to the token issuer service, and then the token will go over to the application. So it's really changing it from the identity provider brokering that connection you're talking to the verifier that's kind of tied in with the application or that entity, that service provider. So you're proving yourself to that verifier, and that verifier is then going and saying, hey, I talked to this person or this credential, this identifier. I know he's good. I looked it up on chain. Everything's kosher there. And then it talks to the token issuer service, and the issuer sends over the token issuer sends over that bearer token to the application. So it's just a different way of going about the standard sign-in process.
So Eric, I know that you wanted to also probably add to this right now. I just wanted to ask if we as Intercoin let's say we decided to build our own authenticator app, right? For voting, let's say, there's a website and people want to vote and they need to make sure that their vote matches, like they voted literally for the guy they wanted to, right? As opposed to like the site lying to them, right? Then they would scan the QR code and they would see it on our authenticator app, and our authenticator app confirms, yeah, you really want to vote for that guy. Yeah, right. That sort of thing. Microsoft Authenticator, that's who we trust, right? I'm trusting Google Chrome with the browser. I'm trusting Apple's laptop. That's my trusted computing base, right? Operating system. I'm trusting Microsoft's Authenticator app. Is there an open standard? Can we build our own? Can other people build their own wallet the same way that Ethereum wallets are, there's like tons of Ethereum wallets. Is it an open standard right now? Or is it Microsoft's authenticators has to be the one to store the credentials?
So Microsoft's Authenticator app is supported in our implementation because we're leveraging that abstraction to the side tree through Microsoft. So they're kind of talking that language of what format the VC comes over and how they interact with each other. But VCs themselves, right, are open standard. So you could absolutely build your own wallet, implement your own system to talk to the chain and issue VCs and verify VCs. Absolutely. Just the ecosystem that we're operating in, we're partnered with Microsoft and leveraging their API extraction. We do know that there's more wallet support coming, but right now they're just targeting on the Authenticator app. But absolutely, it's open standards. It's just driving that interop between the wallets, the issuers, the providers, and kind of getting them all to talk the same language. I believe they're working on actually standardizing that interaction right now, as opposed to kind of just leaving it open and you can kind of implement it however you want. But that is coming and it's there, right? It's all open. You just kind of have to do the legwork. But I do think the DIF, I believe, is working on defining that standard.
Yeah, I think it's open. You could use any blockchain. It doesn't even have to be on the back end of the Bitcoin blockchain, right? So
yep.
As long as you follow these protocols, you can build your own authenticator app, I guess, hopefully.
At least a wallet to receive VCs, so yeah.
Yeah, your wallet, exactly.
Yeah.
So Eric, what's your vision for, let's say 2 years from now, this thing is built out, and are there like multiple wallets? Like there's Microsoft wallet, there's, Apple wallet, there's wallets made by Intercoin maybe, or whatever. How do you see the ecosystem, like from the user's point of view? I want to always ask from the regular person's point of view, right? What do? Do they download something from the App Store? Like how they can land on a site, what happens? Like what exactly is the onboarding for people,
Yeah, so again, as a public benefit corporation, our mission is to simplify civic engagement. And so it's all about the user. That's our mission. And the technology that is built as today is and Dave alluded to, is a very simple tie-in or hook in to really any login workflow. It's pretty simple. You do need to download an authenticator app on your phone. You need to have a digital wallet on your phone. But beyond that, there won't be anything necessarily that you need to do. It's just when you go to engage with government, with an agency, how you enter into that workflow will be hooked into your authenticator, will be hooked into your digital wallet. So when you go to log in, you present your phone essentially.
So kind of like this, right? You kind of have a QR code.
Yep, exactly right. So it will change a little bit. We're doing it now already. It's becoming much more ubiquitous right now. This workflow is becoming more common, and over time, this is going to continue to accelerate. Not only because of UltraPass, but this is where we're headed. And over the next couple of years, I can see this becoming as obvious and common as username and password. It's just going to become ubiquitous. This is going to be how you engage with websites. And what we as UltraPass are looking to do, which makes us a little bit unique, is that our focus is on civic engagement. It's not about KYC into financial services. There's a lot of that. There's money. That's because that's where the money is. What we're doing is similar. Our technology and our data privacy is cutting edge. It is maybe bleeding edge, which is not always a good thing, but it's cutting edge, using ION as essentially the back end to prove truth. But at the end of the day, the process for a user is going to be so simple that they're used to it. That's the only way this works. Is instead of it being username and password, it's a QR code on your cell phone with an authentication workflow, and then you're anonymous to the point where you're just giving what's necessary and it's proven. But it becomes so easy to use. As I mentioned earlier, I want you receiving unemployment insurance the moment you lost your job, and that happens all through this kind of workflow with a little click of a button. Make it super simple. That's what I'd like to see over the next couple of years. It's going to take time working with agencies and governments. These things take time, but what we know the government knows it needs to do this. Every agency knows it needs to do this. It needs to provide a better, more secure, streamlined service to its constituents, its citizens. And we know the people want it. We know the people recognize that these systems are broken. So we know the demand, the need is out there, and just so few are focusing on solving the problem. So that's where UltraPass steps in. We're gonna facilitate this evolution of civic engagement and accelerate. And you made it perfectly clear. If it was so easy to vote, you would vote more.
I think
That's the goal. That's the key. We're making it so easy to engage with the government. You're going to engage more, and you can do it in a way that you control the privacy. You control your own self. You control your own privacy. So I'm excited for what's coming next. I look forward to working with the ecosystem, with the community to help bring this forward. We're going to need lots of partners as we go through this, lots of them, to help digitally transform agencies and all of those things to make this a reality. So there's a lot of work to be done, but there are things we can do right now that is going to make the experience better for everybody. But there's a lot of heavy lifting to really transform the way in which we engage with government.
Absolutely. I think you guys are solving really important problems. I think the vision is exactly what society needs right now in order to have civic engagement. I would even say that, government, we only talk about federal governments usually because the machinery is so expensive that we only vote once in a while. If this becomes so cheap, we can have the idea of a government, a neighborhood government, or we could belong to 10 different communities and be able to vote in all of them and do all kinds of things, And that, I think what we talked about, technology decentralizes the means to everybody, to what they do. I just want to say, just get your opinion. One last thing about Intercoin. I just wanted to get your take on it. What we do at Intercoin is I think we take what you guys do and we run with it. We create applications like voting, right? Like universal basic income. And that's why we want to work with the Forward Party and others to basically create, maybe with New York City Coin. We were thinking of going to use New York City ID with their OAuth. Okay, they have an OAuth that ensures that we have one, shall we say, one account per person. On a global scale, there's something that Vitalik is involved in, and Scott Santons, who's going to be on this program later. They talk about how to ensure each person has one account. and they're trying to different network analysis stuff. And then there's like creepier stuff like WorldCoin, scan people's eyeballs for in exchange for crypto. Make sure that people have one account. Sam Altman used to run Y Combinator. There's all these approaches to make sure that people have at most one account. And so I wanted to kind of just last thing, and would love to get your take on Intercoin's sort of taking what you guys do and using it exactly for civic engagement, right? So community, putting it on the blockchain maybe as NFTs also, because that's just what, it's just another way to look at roles. But more importantly, New York City coin, being able to airdrop it to everyone every day, perhaps end food insecurity and hunger by having everyone wake up with enough money to buy food so they never have to beg on the street. Being able to, have voting like we were talking about. So my question to you is like, if instead of using New York City ID as in its current form, right? What do you see as looking at, what could it look like if all of us were to work together? Obviously, there's a lot of details. I'm just talking about like highlights. What do you think?
Let me just say this one. UltraPass isn't building applications we're not building voting applications. We're not building a UBI application. What we do is facilitate the interaction between those applications and individuals so that it's being so that the appropriate, and we don't even define what appropriate is, right? That's defined by the application. The appropriate user is accessing that application to do the things that the user wants to do. And that's so we fit in anytime there's a need to validate a user, authenticate a user as that the application can trust. That's what we do. And so is there an opportunity to work with Intercoin? Of course. There's opportunities to work with anybody that is developing or providing a solution that's going to make civic activities easier. Let's do it. The IDNYC, I think the history that was done through underneath Bloomberg by Bloomberg to really get identities into the hands of the homeless. It's evolved since then in quite considerably. It's a very good effort. We could work with IDNYC actually as an issuer. IDNYC would be an issuer of a VC, and we can help facilitate that process. And then verifiers that accept IDNYC would be accepting the digital version of IDNYC, which is a verifiable credential issued by IDNYC. So there's lots of opportunities for us to work with everybody and anybody, but we want to be focused on making sure that we're providing an easier engagement with for civic activities. That's the goal. We want to make it easier. It shouldn't be difficult.
Intercoin, making crypto mainstream.